It's the beginning of fall and the next semester of school starting up. You decide you need some new clothes to make a killer first impression in your classes. If you do your shopping in a big chain store, in person or online, you're engaging with a market that's on a global scale. Those clothes you're buying have likely traveled thousands of miles through the hands of dozens of different people. And even if you opt to buy secondhand or local, someone still made the cloth, designed the patterns, sewed the pieces together. You get the picture. While there are some ways of purchasing that can eliminate some parts of the global market, it's hard to get completely away from it. This may seem normal to us, but the scale of these relationships in our modern market is really recent. Throughout most of history and for most people, your market was local and trade was often local, personal, and limited. You had the blacksmith, and well, you'd better not have made inappropriate advances to his wife, or you're hiking to the next town over to buy those nails. More importantly, while your spices, textiles, jewelry, or other special somethings might come from further away, think Silk Road, people didn't buy new clothes very often. And when they did, it was the dressmaker and tailor who were cutting your clothes around you, custom to your body and needs. There wasn't a Forever 1121 or Ye Old Navy in sight. That is, before the emergence of capitalism. In the span of a few hundred years, a shift took place, moving the world away from local trade to a new system that is not only impersonal, but that reorganizes our culture into a new kind of society. A market society. For better or worse, capitalism has shaped the world we live in today. And this just wouldn't be an American history course if we didn't talk about it. I'm Dr. Danielle Bainbridge, and this is Study Hall U.S. History to 1865. People need stuff. None of us would get very far without clothes or shoes or power bars. We humans are an inventive lot, and we rely on our stuff to navigate and survive this weird world we help to shape. We use markets to get that stuff, especially items that we can't make ourselves. And those markets have changed over time to fit the kinds of societies we live in. Markets have existed for as long as, if not longer than, cities, and served as places where people could trade for or buy the things they needed, which are called subsistence goods, or the things they wanted, which are called commodity goods. So baking flour or locally spun wool to replace an everyday dress would be examples of subsistence goods. Tobacco or imported silk fabric for a ball gown, though, commodity goods. While social class can get involved, it's generally pretty easy to remember the difference between subsistence goods and commodity goods because your subsistence goods are your existence goods, or the things you need to keep existing. And on the other hand, we currently tend to associate capitalism with commodity goods, and lots of them, which is an easy connection to make in our overstuffed modern world. But it's worth remembering that people have always appreciated shiny beads and beautiful fabrics. The difference here, even when we're talking about local linen clothing versus silk that's been produced at a special company far away, is capitalism. But Danielle, you say, what is capitalism? Capitalism is an economic and cultural system that focuses on private businesses needing to turn a profit and individual initiative. You might also hear people talk about the free market, which is where buyers and sellers exchange goods and services, and how the free market focuses on competition to set prices and generate wealth. It imagines a future where markets and profits can or even must continue to expand, as can the amount of stuff we produce. That's very different from, say, mercantilism, which was Renaissance Europe's favorite brand of economics. Mercantilism imagined a finite amount of wealth in the world that nations would have to compete for. These largely monarchical societies regulated their citizens to try and import as little as possible, while exporting as much as possible. Capitalism might seem radically different from this other kind of economics, but in this way, at least, it's business as usual. Just like any economic system, capitalism relies on norms and institutions to exist. It's not the culmination of economic progress, but just another marketplace system that happened to fit the needs of early American society, which in turn grew to support capitalist structures. So what was it about America in the late 1700s that proved to be the place for capitalism to flourish? Well, capitalism emerged in 18th century England and challenged old ways of doing things. All the political turmoil of that era really rocked Britain's economic boat, and the country found itself exploring different ways of thinking and working, and thinking about working. But English society was better equipped to deal with mercantilism. Laws that had been put in place to help grow the monarchy and state supported monopolies ended up hindering those new ideas. Instead, it was in post revolution America, newly free from all those English restrictions, that capitalism really took off. And risky innovation was the name of the game. Incorporation laws that limited investment risk for new business owners and easy patents made it worthwhile for US entrepreneurs to experiment with faster kinds of production and to create new types of products. Insurance schemes that had been used by merchant ships began to cover other types of goods and were later applied to enslaved people, protecting enslavers and those who invested in slavery from financial loss. All this credit helped to bolster the newly dynamic, if unstable, US currency, which further grew the economy. In the Northeast, the Industrial Revolution, which is the process by which society changed from a handcrafted farming society to one dominated by machines and manufacturing plants, was led by the textile mills. These new machines brought weaving out of the home and into a centralized location of machine manufacturing. And all that cotton those northern textile mills used had to come from somewhere. We've talked before about the cotton gin and the emergence of king cotton in the South. Those textile mills were a big part of why cotton was so profitable. And as cotton production increased, so did the demand for enslaved laborers. Cotton textiles became a worldwide commodity, one of the nation's first. So America's early ventures into the global marketplace were intimately connected to Black enslavement. Now it's important to remember that capitalism emerges in different ways depending on the time and place. And even though big cities were growing in population during the era, the US remained a mostly rural nation. And for those rural Americans, this blossoming consumer society made fast friends with the seemingly endless land and resources. To have a market, you have to get your goods to the people who want to buy them. And moving goods around was much harder in America than in Europe, especially the farther west you traveled. And there were good reasons to travel west. Many Americans were farmers, and the land out west was cheap and plentiful, provided you could get there in one piece. But the US didn't have the vast systems of roads that European countries had spent centuries building and rebuilding. And there was a lot more land to cover. This was a real issue, and state governments were quick to sponsor construction projects like the Erie Canal, which was a human-made canal dug out between Buffalo and Albany, New York, that was completed in 1825. Originally only 4 feet deep and 40 feet wide, that was enough for shallow boats to move people between the two cities in 5 days instead of the standard 2 weeks a stagecoach would take. That's not bad for 363 miles. Information travel was helped along by the US Postal Service, which established post offices in towns from the Atlantic to the Mississippi River. By 1828, the US had more post offices than any other country in the world. Newspapers, magazines, and other kinds of publications traveled with the Postal Service, helping to spread ideas about the new market. For instance, there were articles about how to grow and sell more efficient crops, and how to get in on that land that was available if you ignored the indigenous people already living on it. Between 1840 and 1860, the US collectively built more than 30,000 miles of railway to help bridge the gaps between towns and cities and to help move goods, people, and information across the country. In addition to increasing the scope and speed of commerce, the development of the railway made travel more affordable, further encouraging Americans to move west into more indigenous territories. And just as American technology, laws, and infrastructure adapted to meet the demands of this new market economy, so did American culture. More and more, the mind of American business shifted away from communities to how best to exploit this new, nationwide market. This was perhaps the biggest cultural shift that came from the market revolution. Americans gained confidence in the power of banks, in the power of US currency, and in their own enterprising will. This led to another slightly less idealistic belief, that if you don't take advantage of the market, someone else will, because capitalism relies on individual competition. Many free Americans living in the early 19th century experienced an increased quality of life as the economy underwent a period of rapid growth. The fuel for this fire came from cheap land, easy credit, and innovations in laws that all helped to encourage people to take up the entrepreneurial lifestyle. At the same time, the new railway and postal systems helped to spread the good word about American business, leading to a cultural pursuit of profit and business efficiency that was like nothing else at the time. But those profits didn't come from nowhere. American capitalism and its systems depended on intense, widespread exploitation of land, natural resources, enslaved people, and wage labor. And the American mission to cultivate the country came at a high cost for indigenous peoples. The Indian Removal Act of 1830 forced the removal of the Cherokee, Chickasaw, Choctaw, Creek, and Seminole tribes from the southeastern U.S. from 1830 to 1850. It was just one example of exploitative policymaking meant to benefit white settlers and the US economy. It would ultimately lead to the deaths of thousands who were forced to march along the Trail of Tears, the route leading tribes away from their ancestral lands. Likewise, American capitalism was deeply linked to Black enslavement. The demand for cotton textiles alone protected and perpetuated the local, regional, and national power structures of race-based slavery in the US. The transition to wage-based labor that drove the market economy created a whole new class of low-paid workers who toiled in dangerous conditions. Many of these were Irish and German immigrants who had little protection from the market's boom and bust cycles and were forced to accept low wages. Capitalism emerged in America because of a series of intentional choices, a healthy dose of luck, and its ability to fit the specific needs of the new nation. This new economic system encouraged individuals to take on risky ventures as legal, financial, cultural, and social changes converged, following the transportation and communication innovations allowed by the railway and postal system. These changes resulted in a great deal of wealth for a small but growing portion of the population and created opportunity for many Americans, just as it did oppression for others. Thanks for watching Study Hall U.S. History to 1865, which is part of the Study Hall Project, a partnership between ASU and Crash Course. If you like this video and want to keep learning with us, be sure to subscribe. You can learn more about Study Hall and the videos produced by Crash Course and ASU in the links in the description. See you next time.